Today we are going to study about the topic ecosystem. I think this topic is not new to you. You have been learning this topic, or you are very familiar with this topic ecosystem right from your smaller classes. Let us today learn more in detail about what is ecosystem. The term ecosystem was coined by Sir A.J. Tansley in the year 1935. Now, how do we define ecosystem? Now, this is the definition. I have two definitions over here. One is straight away from your textbook, and this is what you have to study. So, let me first read out this definition about ecosystem to you. An ecosystem is defined as a self-sustained and self-regulated functional unit of nature where living organisms interact among themselves and also with their surrounding physical environment. Or to keep it more simple, let us understand ecosystem as any place where living organisms live, interact among themselves and also with their physical environment. When I say physical environment, it means the air around them, it means the water, light, temperature, wind, humidity, all these are referred to as its physical environment. That means the place where I am standing right now can also be termed as an ecosystem. The same manner, the place where you are sitting right now listening to me, that place is also an ecosystem. I hope that's clear to you. Now, ecosystem, the size of the ecosystem. Let us take the next topic, size of an ecosystem. What about the size of an ecosystem? Now, size of an ecosystem greatly varies from a very small pond to a very large forest or a sea. As I told you, the place where you're sitting is also an ecosystem. The place where I am standing is also an ecosystem because it comprises both living organism as well as the physical environment around it. That itself is required to form an ecosystem. Now, many ecologists regards the entire biosphere or the entire earth as a global ecosystem, as a composite of all local ecosystems on the earth. So many ecologists consider this whole global, the whole earth as a global ecosystem. Now, it's very difficult to study the ecosystem as a whole on a global basis. So what we need to do? We know that in order to make our studies more easier and convenient, we always go for classification. So next, we go to the next slide where we're going to talk about the types of ecosystem. Now, types of ecosystem, we can broadly classify. You know that the earth, as I told you, is a global ecosystem. You know the earth comprises of both land and water. So let us assume the land part of the globe as a terrestrial ecosystem and the area which contains water. You know, the 70% of the land, 70% of the earth comprises of water. So that forms the aquatic ecosystem. Let us go to a much more detailed classification of ecosystem. Ecosystem, as I told you in my previous slide, I told you ecosystem can be classified as terrestrial and aquatic. Again, under terrestrial, it can be classified again as natural and man-made. Likewise, for aquatic also, it can be classified as natural and man-made. Now, under natural terrestrial ecosystem, we have the following. We can further subclassify them as forest. Now, again, when I say forest, there will be further classification into it also. For example, when I say there are again different kinds of forests, and they again serve as different types of ecosystem. For example, tropical rainforest, deciduous forest, coniferous forest, all these comes under forest ecosystem. Then you have the desert ecosystem, the cold desert, the hot desert, then as well as grassland. These are also referred to as terrestrial natural ecosystem. Then we have man-made like orchids, orchards, parks, zoos, botanical garden, crop fields. These are man-made. So therefore they are referred to as man-made or anthropogenic ecosystem. This is created by man. For aquatic ecosystem, again you can classify the same manner as you classified terrestrial ecosystem. It can be classified as natural and man-made again. Natural again can be classified as freshwater and marine. I hope you know the difference between freshwater and marine. Freshwater means where the water will be having a lower salt content, whereas marine will be having much more higher salt content. So under the fresh water, again you have the following type of ecosystems like rivers, streams, ponds, lakes, swamps and marshes. Under marine ecosystem, again you have different sorts of ecosystem here: oceans, estuaries, coral reefs, coastal ecosystem. And then for aquatic, man-made ecosystems are aquarium, likewise man-made lakes as well as ponds are also there. So till now we have learned about what is the definition of ecosystem. I hope you have understood. So it's any place which comprises of both living as well as non-living interacting with each other. And we've learnt about the earth can be considered as a global ecosystem, but since it is very difficult to study, so we have further classified as terrestrial and aquatic ecosystem. And again into that also we have further classified them as man-made and natural. So I hope that is all clear to you. Moving on to the next aspect of ecosystem. Components of ecosystem. As I've already told you, ecosystem comprises of both abiotic and biotic components. What are abiotic components? Abiotic components are the non-living components, or you can say all the physical components. Physical components like light, temperature, water, soil, air, wind, humidity, which surrounds an organism is what is referred to as the abiotic component. Then what is the other important component of the ecosystem? The other very important component of the ecosystem are the living organisms. Now living organisms are classified again in an ecosystem according to the jobs what they do or according to what they eat. To more correctly say, for example, they are classified as producers, consumers, decomposers or saprotrophs. Now these terms are very familiar to you and you know about them. Again I explain it to you. Under the producers, now who are producers? Producers are those organisms which have the ability to produce their own food. Now under producers again you have chemoautotrophs and photoautotrophs. What is the difference between them? The difference lies in this first part. Chemo, look at the term chemo, and here it is photo. Photo, as you know, light. So these are those organisms which synthesize their food. They make their own food using light or sunlight as a source of energy. Whereas, for example, it includes all the green plants, algae, phytoplankton, cyanobacteria, they are all photoautotrophs. On the other hand, chemoautotrophs are those organisms which make use of chemical energy. Instead of light, they make use of chemical energy in order to synthesize their own food. We have a lot of chemosynthetic bacteria which has the ability to synthesize their own food using chemical energy. So they are referred to as chemoautotrophs. Okay, now what are consumers? Consumers are those organisms which feed on producers directly or indirectly. Okay, and they are further classified as primary consumers or herbivores. Now who are primary consumers or herbivores? Primary consumers or herbivores are those organisms which directly feed on the producers. They are referred to as primary consumers or herbivores. Next comes secondary consumers or primary carnivores. They are those which feed on the primary consumers or the herbivores. That is why they are referred to as secondary consumers or primary carnivores. They would in turn be eaten by the next set of organisms which are referred to as tertiary consumers or secondary consumers, and finally the tertiary consumers in turn may be eaten by quaternary consumers or the top carnivores. And the third group of biotic organism in the ecosystems are referred to as decomposers or saprotrophs. Now what do the decomposers or saprotrophs do? Now they do not make their food or they do not eat their food. Instead what they do is they absorb the nutrients from the dead decaying organic matter by pouring out digestive enzymes over them and breaking them into simpler components and then absorbing it. And therefore they are also useful in a very important function in the ecosystem, that is decomposition. I think this is clear to you about the components of the ecosystem. Again, remember abiotic and biotic, and remember these are constantly interacting with each other. Okay, so let us now talk about another aspect of ecosystem, that is structure, ecosystem structure. Each ecosystem will be having its own structure, which is shown through its species composition and stratification. Now, what is species composition? Species composition means the type of living organisms present within an ecosystem. The type of living organisms living in a specific ecosystem would be determined by the prevailing climatic conditions and topography. What kind of climatic conditions that ecosystem is in? What kind is the topography? Topography means the surface feature of land, whether the land area is a plain area, whether it is hill, whether it is mountainous area, whether it is a valley, all these are referred to as topography. So climate and topography of an area will determine the type of species living in that ecosystem, and that is what is referred to as species composition. For example, forest will differ in type and density of vegetation when compared to a desert. Sorry for the mistake here, it is desert, not forest. That is, when you look at, how do you say this is a forest? How do you say that ecosystem is a desert? A forest will be having its own set of species composition. Likewise, a desert will be having its own set of species composition. Let us look at a few slides, some pictures of the different kinds of forests and some other ecosystem to understand about species composition. Now here in the slide you can see I have put here some different types of forests. Now they all won't be having similar type of plants. For example, I have put tropical rainforest here. These are the deciduous forest and coniferous forest. You know, in the coniferous forest, the type of plants that are seen in the coniferous forest may not be seen in the tropical forest or the deciduous forest, because the climatic conditions of the topography is differing in tropical rainforest and in the coniferous forest. In coniferous forest, you know, the temperature is very less. The precipitation is in the form of, not in the form of rainfall, but is in the form of snow. So in order for the snow to slide down, they have what kind of trees? They have trees which are cone-like. They will be having more of gymnosperms over there. On the contrary, if you come to tropical rainforest, you won't find conifers here, because here it is continuously raining throughout the year. They have a different sort of climatic conditions. Here the plants will be much more greener, they'll be more denser, and they'll be having much more broader leaves. On the other hand, deciduous forest would be having other sort of trees here, since the deciduous forests have different sort of climatic condition. That is, they have different seasons, and you will find that at a particular time of the year they will shed off their leaves, and that is why they have been referred to as the deciduous forest. The kind of plant in an ecosystem will also determine the kind of animals. I hope it's clear, because you may not find polar bears in tropical rainforest, but you may find them in the colder areas. So likewise, I said, each ecosystem will be having its own species composition, and is because of the interaction between the abiotic and the biotic. Plants which are well adapted to such environmental conditions will be able to develop in coniferous forests. Plants which can withstand high temperature, high humidity will be able to grow in the tropical rainforest. So again, it is because of the interaction. Let us go to another two ecosystems, which are the desert ecosystem, grassland ecosystem. Again, here also you will find species composition differs. Here in desert ecosystem you find the conditions are very extreme. Rainfall is very scarce, very less, and the soil is devoid of nutrients. So you'll find here, since the temperature conditions is high, you will have plants very less here. So less number of plants will be there, and the animals which can survive under such conditions or can be able to interact under such conditions efficiently will be able to be seen in a desert ecosystem. So it will be having its own species composition. In the same manner, grassland will be having its own species composition, because it has its own set of climatic condition under which a specific kind of living organisms can survive. Let me also take two other ecosystem especially aquatic ecosystem like the coral reefs and the rivers. They both again are aquatic ecosystem, yet they differ in their species composition. Again, why is it so? Because of the kind of climatic conditions in the, prevailing in these areas, they will be having their own type of species composition. I hope through these slides it's clear to you what is meant by species composition. It is nothing else but the type of living organisms present in a ecosystem is what is referred to as species composition, and they will differ from ecosystem to ecosystem because it is determined by the climatic conditions and the topography. So that is about the ecosystem structure in terms of species composition. Now next is another ecosystem structure. Another thing about ecosystem structure is each ecosystem will be showing stratification. I hope you know what is strata. Strata means layers or different zones. So I'll read it out from here. Vertical distribution of different species occupying different levels is called stratification. Example, trees occupy the topmost vertical strata or layer of a forest. Then you have the smaller trees and the shrubs, and then followed by small grasses or herbs. So in a forest, you'll find the ecosystem would be divided into different strata. For example, here you can see the vegetation has been divided into different. It is not divided as such, but you can see small plants growing here. They form a lower strata, the forest floor. Then comes the herbs and the shrubs, then followed by the taller trees. So this is what is referred to as stratification. This is again an important feature of the ecosystem structure. Now, tropical rainforest is so rich in biodiversity that you'll find a lot of stratification. But when you go to a desert, the stratification won't be seen, like as you see in the rainforest. And as the plants show stratification over here, plants are at different layers, they occupy different layers. The plants which require more light would be seen at the top. On the other hand, the herbs which require less amount of light would be seen growing at the top, the bottom floor of the forest. Now, along with the plant zonation, you will also find animals also living in this various stratas. For example, in the layers of the forest floor, what will you find? You will find small organisms like earthworms, centipedes, millipedes. These are some organisms that may be inhabiting on the forest floor, beetles, bugs and all. Likewise, as you move to a little bit higher, the higher level may be occupied by some snakes, frogs. But above, if you go, it may be occupied by monkeys. Above, as you go, the next strata would be occupied by birds. So this is what is referred to as stratification. Let us also see zonation in lake. As you saw, the zonation or stratification in a rainforest. So you'll find each zone would be having its own specific conditions again. The topmost strata in the rainforest will be receiving maximum light, but as we come down to the lower strata, the availability of light will be lesser. The same manner, as you come to a lake, stratification or zonation in lake also, you may see, you can divide the lake into the following zones, again stratas. For example, the shoreline or the edges of the lake would be referred to as the littoral zone. I hope that is clear. Littoral, littoral zone. This is that zone where light would be very high, light penetration would be quite high. It's a shallow area of the lake. This area would be rich in nutrients because it is receiving the water from the nearby areas. So it will be rich in a lot of organic nutrients. And here you will find a lot of plants growing. As you come down, the next layer, this area is referred to as the limnetic zone. Limnetic, limnetic zone. This is that area where light penetration is more, oxygen availability is high. So you'll find a lot of organisms, a lot of phytoplanktons and algae in abundance in this particular zone of the lake. As you come down, the next zone is the Profundo Zone. Now, why this kind of zone is formed over here? Profundal, Profundal, Profundal. As you come down the lake, here the conditions will differ from what is above. Here light penetration would be less. As you come down, oxygen availability would be very less. So here you may not find phytoplanktons or other algae growing over here because they require light. Okay, and the amount of fishes also would be much lesser because as the oxygen availability is becoming lesser. Then comes to the bottom. The bottom layer of a zone of the lake is referred to as the benthic zone. Benthic zone, it is that place where you'll find the oxygen availability as well as the light penetration would be very less. But this area would be rich in organic matter. So you will find a lot of bacteria and fungi or a lot of decomposers in this zone. So likewise, each ecosystem would be having its own stratification. I hope that is clear about ecosystem structure in terms of species composition and stratification. Now, let us talk about the functions of the ecosystem. Remember the definition that I gave you in the beginning? How do you define ecosystem? Ecosystem is a self-regulated and self-sustained functional unit of nature where living organisms interact among themselves and also with their physical environment. So we had termed or we had defined ecosystem as self-sustained and self-regulated. What is meant by self-regulated? Self-regulated means it is able to control its affairs on its own. Nobody else is coming from outside and controlling the affairs of the ecosystem. Ecosystem is going on. It is going on its own. Okay, it's self-regulated. Self-sustained means everything is maintained in an ecosystem without any outside interference. It is able to maintain its own self. It is able to sustain its own self. It is able to control. But how is this able to do? How is the ecosystem able to regulate and sustain itself? And this is because of the four important functions happening in an ecosystem, which happens because of the interaction between abiotic and biotic. And these four very important functions of the ecosystem are productivity, decomposition, energy flow, and nutrient cycling. So let us now first talk about each one of them separately. To begin with, let us first talk about productivity. Productivity. Now, when you look at the term productivity, you will come to know, you'll understand that this term has come from the term, or this word has come from the term production. Production means to produce something. Okay. Now in order for the ecosystem to continue to sustain, it requires some energy. Okay. Any system, if it has to function, it requires energy. So likewise, any system or likewise, ecosystem also requires energy to survive, energy to sustain, energy to control. So what is the source of this energy and what is the use of this energy? The source of this energy is sunlight. A constant input of solar energy is a basic requirement for any ecosystem to function and sustain. So in order to function and sustain, every ecosystem requires energy, and the prime source of energy is the sunlight. And how does this sunlight, or how does this light energy from the sun sustains this environment? This is what we are going to study, and that is sustained with the help of something referred to as productivity. Now, what is productivity? Primary production is defined as the amount of biomass or organic matter produced per unit area over a time period of plants during photosynthesis. That's very simple. Production. Now I will say that this productivity is further divided as primary productivity as well as secondary productivity. Primary productivity, as the name suggests, primary. Primary means the very first. For example, when we go for education, the first education that we get is the primary and then followed by the secondary. Same manner, who are the first producers? Now what are they producing? Now the producer now it is, you can see here, it is done by plants. Productivity or primary production. Production of what? Production of organic matter. What is organic matter? Organic matter means any carbon based substances are referred to as organic matter. So the production of organic matter from inorganic nutrients by making use of solar energy by plants is what is referred to as primary production. Okay, so when they prepare this organic matter, which is also referred to as their biomass, what happens? they are storing energy. The light energy is stored in the chemical bonds of this organic matter, and therefore you will find that this primary production is expressed in terms of weight or energy. It is either expressed in terms of weight or energy. Gram per meter square. There's a slight mistake over there. It should be gram per meter square, and or in the form of energy, kilocalorie per meter square. And the rate of biomass production is called as productivity. It is expressed in terms of gram, again there's a slight mistake here, gram meter square per year, or in terms of energy, kilocalorie per meter square per year, to compare the productivity of different ecosystems. To keep it very simple, just to understand this much, productivity is nothing, or primary productivity is nothing, but it is the production of organic matter from inorganic nutrients by plants during photosynthesis, and it can be expressed in terms of weight, or it can be expressed in terms of energy, that is kilocalories, or in terms of weight in terms of gram. And the rate of biomass, in order to compare the productivity of different ecosystem, we can make use of rate of biomass production, and this rate of biomass production is referred to as productivity, is called as productivity. Now, so as I told you, there are two types of productivity. One is primary productivity and the other one is secondary productivity. I'll talk about secondary productivity later, but let me first talk about primary productivity. Already told you before, primary productivity, who is going to prepare the organic matter first is the producers. So we will call the producers, that is all green plants, as the primary producers, or we will say they are involved in primary productivity. This primary productivity is further classified into two types. One is gross primary productivity and the other one is net primary productivity. Gross primary productivity of an ecosystem is the rate of production of organic matter during photosynthesis, and a considerable amount of GPP is utilized by plants in respiration. Whereas net primary productivity is actually GPP minus R. GPP minus R. R here refers to respiration loss, and that is referred to as net primary productivity. And this net primary productivity is the available biomass for the consumption to heterotrophs, that is herbivores and decomposers. Let us understand it much more better. So let us understand productivity, and that too primary productivity. So primary productivity is done by plants through a process called photosynthesis. Now let me write the equation for photosynthesis as okay. Now this requires, of course, sunlight and chlorophyll. So this is referred to as, so primary productivity is the production of organic matter. We can call this thing that we see over here is actually glucose. And from this is an organic matter. You understand organic substance, an organic molecule, because it comprises of carbon. Any carbon based compound is referred to as organic matter. So you have glucose here, and how it is being synthesized? It has been synthesized from inorganic nutrients like carbon dioxide and water, with whose help? In the presence of sunlight and chlorophyll. This is done by basically more green plants. So you get glucose. So the organic matter is synthesized. And this is what is referred to as primary productivity. Now, the Again, I told you this primary productivity is classified as GPP, and the next one is NPP. We can further subdivide this primary productivity into GPP and NPP. What is GPP? GPP is gross primary productivity and NPP is net primary productivity. So whatever glucose the plant produces is referred to as its gross primary productivity. But all of this glucose will not be transferred to the next organism. It cannot be now we can't call this as the net primary productivity. The gross primary productivity means the total amount of organic matter that a plant synthesizes is referred to as a gross primary productivity. When GPP, now see, as this plant, now for example, when this plant so right now this plant is doing photosynthesis, preparing glucose. So it has prepared a lot amount of glucose. Now what is the fate of this glucose? Some amount of glucose some amount of glucose, it will be used for cellular respiration. It will be used for cellular respiration. That is, this glucose will be broken down by the plants to carry out their activities. Through cellular respiration, they will get energy. They will get energy to carry out their functions. So to carry out their functions, and therefore the most of this glucose, that is the gross primary productivity, lot of it would be utilized for a process called cellular respiration, and the remaining and some amount of this glucose will be utilized for making various other important biomolecules. Like it will be involved in forming cellulose, it will be involved in forming fatty acids, it will be utilized in the formation of DNA, it will be utilized in the formation of amino acids. So this is the amount that it will be able to retain within itself after cellular respiration, and that is what is referred to as net primary productivity. I hope that is clear. Okay, so let us come back again to primary productivity. So primary productivity is the total amount of organic matter produced by plants during photosynthesis in a given time period, which is further divided as gross primary productivity and net primary productivity. So gross primary productivity is the total organic matter that is synthesized by the plant. Okay, total. And out of this total, I told you, some would be utilized by plants for a process called respiration. Now let us consider this as an analogy. Let me say, for example, after I have done a job for 1 month, let us assume that I got a salary of 10,000 rupees. So this 10,000 rupees is my gross primary productivity. Now this whole thing I won't be spending, but what I will do is, out of this 10,000 rupees, some 5,000 rupees I will be utilizing it for my own survival. For example, for buying food and other things which is required for me to survive. So that is what is the respiration loss in terms of plant. So gross productivity minus that will give you the net primary productivity. So what is left after the expenditure is what is referred to as the net primary productivity. And so I hope this is clear. So GPP minus R is net primary productivity. Again, let me define it. Gross primary productivity minus respiration losses is the net primary productivity. And we can say it is the available biomass. As I told you, some glucose will be utilized for respiration, for carrying out the plant's day-to-day activities, and the remaining amount of glucose will be converted or will be utilized for making other biomolecules, or you can say the organic matter, the biomass of the plant. And when it is utilized by the plant, when it is utilized, what will happen to the plant? It will grow immensely and will become huge, and it will be attaining a huge biomass. And this is available biomass for consumption for eating by the heterotrophs, both herbivores as well as decomposers. Now, let us also talk about secondary productivity. Now, what is secondary productivity? Now, if you can see here, you can see a rabbit eating some carrots. Okay. Now, what is it getting to the rabbit? The rabbit is actually getting the organic matter from the carrot. This organic matter from the carrot, as it is getting the organic matter, energy is getting transferred to it. Now, the organic matter that it receives is referred to as the net primary productivity, because whatever total it has produced, GPP, it has utilized much of it for its respiration in order to derive energy, and the remaining what is left, whatever organic matter is left, is referred to as the NPP, or the net primary productivity, which is now available for the next trophic level or the next organism who is going to directly feed on it. For example, a rabbit over here. So now what will the rabbit do when it eats this NPP, when it eats the organic matter of the plant? What is happening? Again, when it enters this body, what happens? Some of the food will be digested, and it will become its part, that it will be used for forming its own organic matter, or we can say it has been assimilated into its body. And whereas some food or some organic matter would be utilized for respiration, so that will be lost like that, and some would be gone out of its body as undigested waste. So whatever it is able to assimilate and able to convert it into its organic matter or biomass is referred to as a secondary productivity. So secondary productivity is the generation of biomass of heterotrophic organisms in a system. This is driven by the transfer of organic material between trophic levels and represents the quantity of new tissue created through the use of assimilated food. I hope that is clear. So as it has eaten this carrot, it has taken into it the organic matter, and through that organic matter it can't utilize the whole organic matter. Some organic matter will be gone in respiration, some will be gone as undigested waste, and the remaining will be assimilated or will become a part of its own body as an organic matter, and that is, we call it as it has become assimilated, and this is what is referred to as a secondary productivity. The same thing will happen when this rabbit will be eaten by, for example, a fox. When a fox eats it, this organic matter which enters into the fox body will not be completely become a part of it, because some will be utilized for respiration, some would be gone as the undigested waste, and only a little bit of that organic matter would be utilized by the fox to prepare its own organic matter, which is referred to as secondary productivity. So secondary productivity is the generation of biomass by heterotrophs when they eat the plants directly or indirectly. Now let us talk about what are the factors that affect primary productivity. Now, as I told you, primary productivity is done by plants, and it is done through a process called photosynthesis. So all the factors which influences photosynthesis can also be written as factors affecting primary productivity, like plant species inhabiting a particular area and the photosynthetic efficiency. Okay, so the plant species, more taller, the bigger the plant is, having more number of leaves, they will be more photosynthetically efficient. Like with other environmental factors like sunlight. Light is very important for photosynthesis. So you'll find tropical regions which receives maximum light will be exhibiting higher productivity. Temperature again is important for photosynthesis or productivity because it regulates the activity of enzymes. So optimum temperature is required for the functioning of enzyme. Likewise, moisture. For example, water is very important for photosynthesis and therefore for productivity. So you'll find in the tropical rainforest, the productivity will be quite higher as compared to the desert because desert is deficient in moisture. Water availability is very less. Likewise, availability of nutrients. Again, availability of nutrients also ensures greater productivity. Then, variations in primary productivity. Again, you should understand each ecosystem will be having their own amount of production or productivity. It varies from ecosystem to ecosystem. Okay, again it depends upon the kind of plants available over there and the kind of environmental conditions prevailing in that ecosystem. Now, you can see one example over here. The annual net primary productivity of the whole biosphere is approximately 170 billion tons of organic matter. Of this, despite occupying only about 70%, of the surface, the productivity of the oceans are only 55 billion tons. That means, as you all have learned, that the surface of the earth is mainly comprising of water, 70%, in spite of it occupying much more area, but the productivity is very less, that is hardly 55 billion tons. The remaining comes from the land. What is the reason? Land being very less in quantity yet showing maximum productivity. Again, go back to the same factors that affect primary productivity, that is the type of plant species available, availability of light, temperature, nutrients. These all conditions are plentifully present on the land when compared to water. In the water, the photosynthetic efficiency of plants are very less. The plants there are not very tall trees or shrubs, instead they are small phytoplanktons, they are small algae. Water, the light penetration in ocean is also very less. So you'll find that despite of them occupying a large area, surface area, the area of the earth, the productivity in ocean is very less as compared to land. I hope this thing is clear about productivity. In the next class, we shall learn about the next three important functions of the ecosystem.